This lecture will explain us about the information structure and its role in pragmatics. Information structure of some kind of text or discourse is very important to be understood because it carries many overt as well as hidden meanings. In the beginning, I'll just try to explain what information structure is. Information structure may roughly be seen as the structure of information within a certain discourse. It may be beyond a sentence level because at a sentence level we deal with various individual items put together, and we're more concerned about the meaning of a sentence. But here in information structure, we are more concerned about the meaning or the information being conveyed by a whole discourse or a sizable part of a discourse. So information is more about the information or the meaning being conveyed by a certain discourse. And this information has a structure, and that structure is based on certain agenda, or you could say intention of the speaker or the writer who says or writes that particular discourse. We use language for multiple purposes, sometimes to say one thing and other times to say another thing. And language is the one entity which shares and performs our function of communication. During our communicative interactions, we might use the same words to convey different things at different occasions, or we might use the same words to convey the same thing but with different arrangement and in a way that might shift our focus from one thing to another. And this is how information structure is built in a text. In order to explain this further, I'll just try to show you two versions of the same talk, of the same information which is being conveyed, and we'll try to examine which structure is more clear to the reader or is more factual, and which structure has been changed in order to convey a certain intended meaning. In front of you is the example one, which is version 1, and it's just a sequence of some factual details about certain event. At 3 a.m. last Sunday, the Santa Clara Fire Department evacuated 2 apartment buildings at the corner of Country Club Drive and 5th Avenue. I hope you read this with me. Oil had been discovered leaking from a furnace in the basement of one of the buildings. Firefighters sprayed chemical foam over the oil for several hours. By 8 a.m., the situation was under control. Any danger of explosion of fire had been averted and the leaky furnace was sealed. Residents of the 2 apartment buildings were given temporary shelter in the Country Club High School gymnasium. They regained possession of their apartments at 5 p.m. This is how a certain event happened about a certain apartment or a group of apartments where different people live. When you read it, you can understand what is happening around. Now I'll read the other version of the same event, and you, by reading with me, try to find out that what kind of differences are there in 2 versions, and then we'll talk about them in detail. I read the second version. It says, as for Santa Clara Fire Department, it evacuated 2 apartment buildings at the corner of Country Club Drive and 5th Avenue at 3 a.m. Last Sunday, in the basement of one of the buildings, someone had discovered a furnace from which oil was leaking. What was sprayed by firefighters over the oil for several hours was chemical foam. It looks in passive form. It was by 8 a.m. that the situation was under control. What someone had averted was any danger of explosion of fire. And as for the leaky furnace, it was sealed. For the residents of 2 apartment buildings were given in the Country Club High School gymnasium was temporary shelter. Possession of their apartments was regained by them at 5 p.m. You could see the constructions used in these lines are passive in nature. The second version runs quite counter to our expectations of what we generally expect that such an event should be portrayed. It has been tilted in a certain way in which probably we can smell a kind of certain imaging or a kind of certain angling from or on the part of writer or the speaker. Somehow it emphasizes the wrong elements, or it emphasizes the right elements at the wrong time. So emphasis is on different things. I mean, instead of focusing on the right elements, emphasis is on the wrong elements. Who was saved is probably not that important, but the other activities have been highlighted as being important. So you could see the construction of the sentences have been changed in order to emphasize or de-emphasize certain things. Though grammatically correct, I'm talking about second version, the sentence structures of version 2 seem inappropriate to this news report. Because, as I said earlier, this is in a way which we do not expect generally that such a report should be. It is quite contrary to our expectations. Speakers and writers are usually responsible for such deviations or changes. They are responsible for foregrounding or backgrounding certain things in their discourse or text. By foregrounding, I mean putting something forward which you want to show to the audience, and grounding means de-emphasizing something which you don't want your audience to know. It's like how a painter paints his picture. He would like to create a certain contrast, would like to emphasize on a certain color and de-emphasize or tone down another color. So same is the case with our communication. We want to convey certain thing more emphatically, and while simultaneously we might want to convey other things less emphatically, or would like to hide them even. Such highlighting and de-emphasizing of the information in a text is called information structure of a text. Unlike syntax and semantics, which are sentence-based aspects of language, information structure requires the consideration of discourse, how the overall text is being shaped or formulated. It doesn't work on individual or sentences in isolation. Rather, it works on a text as a whole, and by doing so, we get the information which we can see it has been shaped well or not. So, and this kind of shaping of information has a strong bearing on the pragmatic meaning of any text. That's why it's very important to understand information structure of a text in order to understand its complete meanings.